Picture a narrow side street in Kowloon. It is 9:47 on a Tuesday night in October 1972. The air smells of roasted chestnuts and diesel and something sharper underneath. The sweat of men who move for a living. A single sodium lamp flickers above a doorway, throwing orange light across a wet pavement. And in that light, there is a young man standing perfectly still. He is not tall. He weighs no more than 138 pounds. He is wearing dark slacks, a plain white shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and black canvas shoes. His hands hang loose at his sides. His jaw is relaxed. His eyes are open, calm, and absolutely focused on the four men surrounding him. The largest of those four men, a thick-necked figure in a red nylon jacket, has his right palm extended flat. He is demanding something. His voice is loud enough to carry down the alley. The other three are fanned in a loose semicircle, watching the exits, watching each other, not watching the man in white. That is their mistake. 11 seconds from now, one of these men will be sitting on the ground, unable to understand what just happened to his body. Another will take a step backward involuntarily, as though the pavement shifted beneath him. The other two will not move at all, not from courage, but because they will not know what they are seeing. 32 witnesses will later describe what happened on that street. Their accounts will differ on almost every detail except one, that the man in the white shirt never once raised his voice, never once lost a smile, and never once threw the first strike. This is that story. To understand what happened in that alley, you have to understand what Kowloon was in 1972. Hong Kong was changing faster than anyone could track. On one side of the harbor, glass towers were rising on reclaimed land. On the other, in the dense tangle of streets that made up Kowloon, the old economy still operated. Cash, territory, physical presence. The triads had not disappeared. They had simply adapted. They controlled certain blocks the way a landlord controls a building. You paid if you operated. You paid if you walked through. You paid because the alternative was a demonstration of what happened to people who did not pay. The man in the red nylon jacket was known in those streets by a name that translates roughly as the Ox. His given name was Chan Wylock, and by October of 1972, he was 26 years old, 6 feet and 1 inch tall, and 211 pounds of trained muscle and hard experience. He had grown up in the Sham Shui District learning Wing Chun, not from a school, but from the streets, from older men who refined their technique the way tradesmen refine a tool, through constant use. By the time he was 19, he had been in over 60 confrontations. By 23, he had been recruited as a debt collector for a mid-level triad operation based out of Mong Kok. Chan was not a thug in the cinematic sense. He did not enjoy cruelty. What he possessed was something more professionally useful, complete certainty. He had tested himself against large men and small men, trained fighters and desperate ones. His Wing Chun had been forged under conditions no school could replicate, and he knew, with the bone-deep confidence of a man who has never truly lost, exactly what he was capable of. On the night of October 14th, 1972, Chan Wylock and 3 associates had been tasked with collecting an overdue payment from a restaurant owner in the Tsim Sha Sui district. The amount was 720 Hong Kong dollars. The restaurant owner had paid 4 days late the previous month. Late payments required demonstrations. That was the logic of the arrangement. The collection went smoothly. What Chan did not anticipate was the narrow side street he chose as a shortcut back toward Mong Kok, and the man standing alone near the doorway of a closed herbalist shop, apparently waiting for someone. Chan sized him up in under 2 seconds. He saw a slight figure, mid-20s, unremarkable clothes, no visible tension in the body. A civilian, someone who had wandered into the wrong part of the city at the wrong hour. The calculation was automatic. It was not malicious. It was simply the arithmetic of the street. He extended his palm and spoke. The words he used were direct. Hand over your wallet, your watch, and whatever cash you are carrying. His 3 associates spread out. The sodium lamp buzzed overhead. The man in the white shirt looked at the extended palm for a moment. Then he smiled. But here's where it changes. Bruce Lee had spent that evening visiting a friend in the Tsim Sha Sui district, a cinematographer named Chen Yongping, who was working on the post-production phase of Enter the Dragon. The meeting had run long. The last ferry back to his own neighborhood had already departed. He was on foot, in street clothes, navigating the back streets that connected the waterfront to the main road. He was not looking for anything. He was, by all accounts, in a good mood. He was 31 years old. He stood 5 feet 7 inches. He weighed 138 pounds that week. He knew this precisely because he weighed himself every morning. His arms, despite their slender appearance, carried a grip strength that had been measured at 150 pounds of force per hand. His right jab had been clocked in film tests at 5 milliseconds from chamber to full extension, faster than the human eye could consciously register his motion. None of this was visible in the lamplight. What was visible? The slight forward angle of his weight distribution, with both feet placed wider than a casual stance, but not obviously so. The particular way his hands hung, fingers slightly curled, not fists, not loose, something between the two that a trained eye would have recognized immediately. The absolute absence of the micro-movements that anxious people make, the shifting weight, the glancing eyes, the tightening of the jaw. Chon Whylock was a trained eye, but he was not, in that moment, looking for those signals. He was looking at size, at clothes, at whether the man was carrying anything heavy. He registered, small, plain-dressed, unarmed. He did not register the knuckles. The second and third knuckles of Bruce Lee's right hand carried calluses so dense they had changed color, paler than the surrounding skin, almost ivory at the center, built up over 15 years of iron board striking practice. They were the knuckles of a man who had hit things with controlled violence so many thousands of times that the body had rebuilt that tissue into something closer to scar cartilage than ordinary skin. One of the 3 associates, a younger man standing near the left exit of the alley, would later say he noticed the hands. He said he thought about mentioning it. He did not. What happened next, nobody expected. Chon Whylock repeated himself. His Cantonese was sharp, municipal, unambiguous. Empty your pockets. Watch first. Then the wallet. His right hand stayed extended. Palm up. The universal grammar of extraction. Bruce Lee looked at the hand. He looked at Chan's face. Then his gaze moved briefly to each of the 3 associates in turn. A single, unhurried sweep. The way a carpenter looks at the dimensions of a room before deciding where to begin. Then his eyes returned to Chon. He spoke for the first time. His Cantonese was fluid and unhurried. He said approximately, "I don't think that's going to be necessary." Not confrontational, not apologetic. The tone of a man declining a second helping at dinner. Something shifted in the alley. Chon felt it before he could name it. A change in the texture of the exchange, the way a wind changes just before rain. He had collected from hundreds of people. They were afraid, or they were angry, or occasionally they tried to negotiate. This man was doing none of those things. He was simply standing there, hands at his sides, with a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth that was not quite a smile and not quite something else. Chon stepped forward. He came within 4 feet, which is the distance experienced street fighters know as the outer edge of effective reach, close enough to threaten, far enough to give yourself a half second of reaction time. He raised his voice. He said that this was not a discussion. He said that the man had 5 seconds to decide before the decision was made for him. Behind Chon, the youngest associate, 19 years old, 7 months on the job, glanced at the older man to his left. The older man gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Stay back. Something in the way the man in white was standing had created a hesitation he could not have explained. A 4th man appeared at the mouth of the alley, a tea house worker taking out refused bags, who stopped when he saw the configuration of bodies and did not leave. He would later become one of the 32 witnesses. A friend of Bruce's from the cinematographer's building had followed him out at a distance, intending to catch up and walk with him. He was approximately 40 meters back when he saw the situation. He started forward, thinking to call out. Then he stopped. Years later, when interviewed, he said, "I thought about shouting. And then I looked at Bruce's face, the way he was standing, and I thought, no, he already knows what he's doing. Shouting would only confuse the other men." Bruce Lee had not moved a single step. He had not adopted a fighting stance, not overtly, not in any way that would register as an escalation. He simply stood, and he waited. Chon Whylock made his decision. He reached forward with his left hand toward Bruce's collar. His fingers never made contact. In the first second, Chan's left hand moved forward, targeting the collar of the white shirt, a grab designed to control and destabilize, the classic opening move of street-tested Wing Chun. The mechanics were sound. Against most opponents, the grab would land before a defense could be initiated. Bruce Lee's response was not a block. That distinction matters enormously. A block is a reactive movement. It meets force with force, requiring at least as much time as the incoming strike to execute. What Bruce Lee used was a Jeet Kune Do interception principle he called the stop hit, derived from the Western fencing concept of the time hit, but adapted through Wing Chun centerline theory into something faster and more economical than either parent art. His right hand came up inside Chan's extended arm, not meeting the arm, but occupying the space the arm needed to travel through. The contact point was the inside of Chan's forearm, Bruce's wrist pressing diagonally across the radial nerve cluster with precisely calibrated pressure. Not a strike, a redirect. 45 degrees of angular correction applied at the origin point of the movement, using approximately 11 pounds of force. In the second, Chan's grab arrived at a location where the collar no longer was. His own weight and momentum, the force he had already committed to the action, carried his arm past the interception point and into empty air. His body lurched slightly forward. This is what physicists call the conservation of angular momentum and what Jeet Kune Do practitioners call using the opponent's energy. Chan's trained instinct was to recover with a forward step, and that step brought him into a position Bruce had already anticipated. The arena held its breath. 32 people, 4 of whom were active participants, 7 of whom were at various distances in the alley or at its entrance. Not one of them spoke. In the third second, Bruce's left hand was already moving, not toward Chan's face, not toward any high-value target, toward the serratus anterior, the muscle group along the lateral ribcage, below the armpit, that controls the rotation of the shoulder blade. A short palm strike, 4 inches of travel, applied at an angle of 30 degrees from Chan's body plane. The force generated was estimated later by a physics consultant reviewing the witness accounts at approximately 200 pounds per square inch, concentrated in a contact surface roughly the size of a silver dollar. Chan Wylok's left knee buckled, not from pain, from structural interruption. The serratus anterior is part of the kinetic chain that connects the lower body to the upper limb through the shoulder girdle. Disrupted precisely enough and the body's coordination system loses the thread. For 1.3 seconds, Chan's left side simply did not know what the rest of him was doing. He went down to one knee on the wet pavement, without meaning to. The crowd went silent. 3 of the 4 associates were frozen. The youngest, the 19-year-old who had noticed the knuckles, had taken 2 involuntary steps backward, not from cowardice, but from the simple biological shock of seeing something happen that did not follow the rules he knew. The older associate to the left had his hands halfway raised, not in attack, not in surrender, but in pure instinctive uncertainty. The third man, positioned at the far side of the alley, had not moved at all. Bruce Lee stepped back. 1 step. He repositioned to his original location, the same spot he had been standing when Chan had first approached him. He did not adopt a fighting posture. He did not raise his hands. He stood the way he had been standing before any of this began. Chan Wylok was on one knee, his left hand pressed to his ribcage, his breathing rapid but controlled, the breathing of a trained man working through sudden physical disorientation. He looked up. Bruce Lee was looking back at him with an expression that the friend watching from 40 meters away later described as the face of a doctor who has just finished an examination. Not cold, not triumphant, attentive, curious, waiting to see what the patient would do next. Chan had 60-plus confrontations of experience. He had been hit before, hard by large men. He had been knocked down twice and gotten up both times. What he had never experienced was this: the sensation that his own body had been borrowed from him for approximately 3 seconds, operated with greater precision than he himself could manage, and then returned to him without damage. His ribs ached. He would have a bruise there by morning. Nothing was broken. Nothing was permanently affected. That was not an accident. That's not restraint in the conventional sense. That's precision as philosophy, the idea, central to Jeet Kune Do, that a fighter who can choose exactly how much force to apply has already surpassed a fighter who can only apply maximum force. The ability to stop at the necessary point is not weakness. It is the highest form of control. Chan placed his right hand on the pavement and pushed himself upright. He straightened his jacket. His three associates did not move. He looked at Bruce Lee for a long moment. Then he looked at his associates. Then back at Bruce. Then he did something that none of the 32 witnesses expected. He took a step toward Bruce Lee, and he stopped. Not a threat. He stopped at a respectful distance. And he waited. The tea house worker with the refuse bags later said he saw the two men stand facing each other for what felt like a very long time. He estimated it was about 40 seconds. In that 40 seconds, the three associates had drifted toward each other, not threatening anyone, simply repositioning the way people do when the temperature of a situation has fundamentally changed. Chan Wai-lok spoke first. He asked in Cantonese a direct question. What style was that? Bruce Lee considered the question. He said it did not have a simple name. He said that some of it came from Wing Chun, the same route Chan was trained in, and some of it came from boxing, from fencing theory, from watching how the body actually moves when it is committed to an action rather than how a textbook says it should move. Chan said that the strike to the ribs had not felt like a Wing Chun strike. The angle was wrong. Bruce said yes. He explained, briefly, without theater, that centerline theory assumes the opponent is facing you squarely. When the opponent commits to a grab and their shoulder rotates, the centerline rotates with them. The target moves. An effective fighter moves with it rather than striking where the target was. This was, for Chan Wai-lok, a revelation that arrived with the force of something he already knew, but had never articulated. He had been training Wing Chun for 11 years. He understood centerline theory in his hands, in muscle memory, in practice. But no instructor had ever pointed out that an opponent mid-motion was, functionally, a different opponent from the one who had begun the motion. The geometry had shifted, and Bruce Lee had struck the new geometry. Chan asked how long it took to learn to see that. Bruce said, "You already see it. You just haven't started listening to what you see." That line, recorded in the account of the friend who had been approaching from 40 meters and had by this point come close enough to hear, became, for everyone who witnessed that night, the sentence they remembered above all others. Not any technique, not any physical display. That sentence. Bruce Lee extended his hand, not as a formal gesture. His hand was already moving toward Chan's as he spoke, easy and natural, the way you offer a hand to someone you have been talking to at a party for 20 minutes and have found genuinely interesting. Chan Wai-lok looked at the hand for a beat. Then he shook it. The youngest associate, the 19-year-old, later said that he did not fully understand what had just happened, but that watching his boss shake hands with the man in the white shirt, he felt something he could not name. He said it was like watching a lock open. Bruce Lee said goodnight. He said it to all four of them, equally, without irony. Then he turned and continued down the alley toward the main road, his hands in his pockets, his pace unhurried. Chan Wai-lok watched him go. He stood in the orange lamplight for a while after the white shirt had disappeared around the corner. Then he told his associates to go home. No debriefing, no explanation, just go home. He stood there alone for another 3 or 4 minutes. Then he too left. Years later, Chan Wai-lok was no longer collecting debts in Kowloon. He had left that work by 1975, 2.5 years after the night in the alley. He has given several accounts of why he left, some practical, some vague. But in the one extended interview he gave to a Hong Kong martial arts publication in 1983, he said something specific. He said that after that night, he began thinking differently about what Wing Chun was for. Not tactically. Fundamentally, he said the man in the white shirt had used the same root system as him, the same structure, the same core principles, and had arrived somewhere that Chan had not imagined was reachable. He said this made him feel two things simultaneously, respect and a profound dissatisfaction with where he had taken his own training. He began formally studying under a Wing Chun Sifu in Kowloon City in early 1973. He was, at 27, older than most of the other students. He did not care. He trained for 8 years. By 1981, he was teaching his own small class, 16 students initially, in a rented room above a printing shop in Sham Shui Pe. He never told his students about the alley. He told them something else instead. He told them, pay attention to where your target is now, not where it was when you decided to strike. He told them that the moment you commit to a movement, you are operating on old information. The fighter who updates fastest wins. His students did not know they were carrying a lesson that had entered the world on a wet pavement in Kowloon on a Tuesday night in October 1972. They only knew it as something their teacher had told them, which they passed in turn to their own students in the years that followed. The friend who had been 40 meters back that night, the cinematographer's associate, kept in contact with Bruce Lee until Bruce's death in July 1973, 9 months after that evening. He said that he mentioned the alley encounter to Bruce once. A few weeks after it happened, he said Bruce listened, nodded, and then said, "Good, he'll teach it better than I explained it." He did not elaborate. He moved on to the next subject. Now return to that sodium lamp. Return to the wet pavement and the 4 men and the white shirt. The question the alley asked was simple. What does a small man do when surrounded by larger men who have decided he is irrelevant? The answer Bruce Lee gave was not a technique. It was not a style. It was a demonstration of a principle so economical it barely made a sound. Know what you are. Let the situation come to you. And respond only with what the moment requires. 1 street, 1 lamp, 1 man who had nothing to prove and proved everything. 32 witnesses. For seconds. 1 lesson that is still being taught in rooms above printing shops by students of students who never knew the name of the man in the white shirt. That is the legacy, not the fight. There barely was a fight. The legacy is that Chan Wylock stood up from the pavement and chose to become a teacher rather than stay a collector. The legacy is that a 19-year-old watched a lock open and spent the next decade trying to understand the key. The legacy is a sentence. You already see it. You just haven't started listening to what you see. That is still bouncing off the walls of practice halls that Bruce Lee never visited. 1 moment, 1 lesson, 1 truth that refuses to stay in 1972. But there was 1 encounter Bruce Lee never discussed publicly. Not with the cinematographer. Not with his training partners, not even with Linda. An encounter that, by some accounts, shook him in a way that nothing else had. The identity of the person involved has been a matter of quiet dispute among those who knew him best for over 50 years. And the reason he never spoke about it, that's a story for another time.